I don't see the light on. Yep, there we go.
Give me a couple seconds. It's just loading up for this streaming.
Do you want to kick things off, Alan, or do you want me to do the deed?
Yeah, I'll do this. I'll do this one. You got a big one coming up. I don't see the light on. Yep, there we go. David Pincus, you look like you're in your DJ booth. If you could please rename yourself.
Well, hi. Oh, yeah, David Pincus here. Let me rename myself.
You got the voice for it.
Thank you very much, Alan. It's good to be with you.
Mercedes, if you could also rename yourself when you have a chance, please.
You're at 10 folks right now, guys, so you're at quorum.
Yeah. Okay. So we'll get started. We've got a good evening coming up. Welcome, everybody. My name is Alan Oster, and along with my co-chair, Kit Tullisford, we want to welcome you to the February meeting of the Arts, Culture, Education, and Street Life Committee. Just a couple of business details. Of course, we're being recorded. You can visit us again on YouTube on our website, and we're operating under the orders of the governor. Again, this is being recorded. Just a couple of business technical issues and pointers. I'm sure you're all familiar with this by this time. If not, you can access asking a question by using the hand signal. If you're calling in, please *9 to raise your hand and *6 to unmute yourself when you're called upon. We have a great presentation tonight. I think I've covered the business end of it. So before we start, I just wanted to say that I was introduced to Dr. Laskowski and the PEP program by my wife, who is a member of the Bellevue Association, which is an advocacy group, 501c3 advocacy group for the many various public health programs at Bellevue Hospital. So Kit and I took a look at the presentation a while back, and we thought this would be a great opportunity to show how the health system, in conjunction with the education system, can do some wonderful things for the health and well-being of our students. So unless I've forgotten to do something, I will turn this over to Dr. Laskowski, please.
Alan, thanks so much for inviting me to speak to everyone here tonight. One thing I just want to say to start, please feel free to unmute yourself and ask me any questions at any point, or questions in the chat. I'm used to having conversations rather than just like speaking one-sidedly. So in the next few minutes, I'm going to talk about the work that I've been doing through a program called PEP, as Alan mentioned, the Prevention and Education Partnership. And through PEP, my vision is really to transform the role that doctors play in New York City and across the country as ever-present health educators in schools and in the community, which is something that we might all agree is of critical importance right now more than ever before. Next slide. Oh, actually, you know what? Are my slides even showing?
No, I was letting you do an introduction, Larissa.
Oh, thanks.
I'll share the slides now.
Okay, great. Thank you.
So I didn't know when you were wanting me to start.
If I could just interrupt for a second. Basically, once we'll hold the questions until your presentation is finished.
Okay.
And then the committee will comment and ask questions, and at which point we'll turn that over to the attendees in the audience, and then we'll swing back to the committee for a final wrap-up.
Got it.
It's all yours.
Okay, so maybe you could, Vince, thank you. So, just a little bit about me. I am a North New Yorker. I wasn't born here. I was born in South Korea, but I was adopted by Italian-American, Irish-American parents. I was raised on Staten Island, which some of you might consider part of New York City. I do. I'm also an ER doctor. and a medical toxicologist. I trained at NYU and at Bellevue Hospital, where I still happily work. And I was fortunate to be trained by a very special physician, the former chair of my department, Dr. Louis Goldfrank, who taught me and countless of my colleagues to ask of every person that showed up in our emergency department, where is the lesion in the healthcare system? Where is the lesion in society that led that person to us on that particular day? Was it a lack of access to mental health support or addiction specialists? Was it a lack of insurance that prevented them from getting an antibiotic for a simple urinary tract infection that ultimately resulted in a spread to their kidneys and sepsis? Is it a poorly designed intersection that produces repeated bicycle injuries? Whatever the consequence, I was taught not only to consider the cause of someone's bad health outcome, but I was also encouraged to consider it my job, actually, to try and figure out how to fix it. This is my mentor, Dr. Goldfrank. Next slide. So in 2013, I had just graduated from 4 years of ER training, and I was just starting as a new toxicology fellow, taking calls for the New York City Poison Control Center. And I got involved in the care of a few patients that ended up really shaping my career. So one of them, some of you may remember, a 23-year-old man who took Molly at a local music festival called Electric Zoo. He arrived to the hospital with a temperature of 107 degrees. And despite everything we tried to do, he died later that evening. Another was a 23-year-old man, perhaps a trend, but a 23-year-old man who was dared at a party to drink an entire bottle of vodka. And he did that. And he, as you imagine, also suffered pretty severe brain and lung injuries as a result. And after each of these cases, our group reviewed them, again, led by Dr. Goldfrank, and we reflected on what role we as toxicologists and as doctors should be playing in educating the public and preventing these terrible outcomes before they start. Because by the time they reach us in the ER, it's really too late. Next slide. So in 2015, motivated by a conviction that we actually do have a critical role to play, we launched the Prevention and Education Partnership. And through PEP, we mobilized our greatest resource, which is really our doctors and our future doctors, into classrooms throughout New York, where they engage in open, honest, and judgment-free conversations with teenagers about the real risks they face. We impart practical information and harm reduction strategies so that the students can stay safe, healthy, and out of our ER. Next slide. And since our inception, we've developed a vast network of doctors within our institution at NYU, at Bellevue. We have burgeoning partnerships with NY Presbyterian Columbia and Methodist in Brooklyn. And we've also embedded our program into the core curriculum for NYU medical students. In doing so, we've also partnered with the Poison Control Center, the Department of Education, and countless middle and high schools throughout New York City, including some of the schools that are in your district, like New York City Lab Middle and High School. Next slide. To streamline and standardize the conversations that our doctors are having with students, and they really are conversations, we have a framework, really our own evidence-informed, teen-approved harm reduction drug education curriculum called PEP Talks. And when I say we, the people that helped me design it are some of the most well-respected medical toxicologists in the country, if not the world. Next slide. And, you know, the ER and the people that arrive in our ER oftentimes serve as canaries in the coal mine. And we're the ones that are frequently identifying emerging health threats first. Because of that, it actually allows us to respond pretty rapidly, to identify and respond pretty rapidly to the next public health issue that is going to be facing us and our young people. And because of that, we're able to really pivot and adapt. So, you know, even starting back in 2017, we were one of the first groups to be able to meets some, certainly not all, but some of the demand from schools for accurate and timely education about vaping. Next slide. And in 2019 and early 2020, we essentially completely pivoted because there was such a need that we were hearing from schools and our other community partners about vaping. And at the time, the worst public health threat that appeared to be emerging was vaping associated lung injury, with thousands of people, mostly young and healthy, developing this problem and requiring ventilators for survival. Next slide. So one of the approaches that we take through our lessons is to tell our stories. And as you may agree with me, people are not always motivated by facts. But sometimes, and maybe even more so than facts, people are motivated by stories that kind of trigger an emotional response, and then also help them have a realistic picture of what kind of immediate risks exist. So, for example, in our talks, we always talk about cases that we've seen personally, or that our institution has helped to manage. And this is one of the things that the students really appreciate, not only because of the information they're being given, but also because it takes a theoretical risk and it makes it very concrete. And also, I think because of the people that are delivering it, there's some degree of trust that that we have their best interests at heart and aren't just telling them this to scare them. Next slide. So I think that what we're doing is working. I may be biased, but in surveys of some of the high school students that we've done, the overwhelming majority of teens have said that pep talks made it less likely they would use drugs in the future. And 100% of them say that our program is useful to them. Next slide. And, taking anecdotes for what they're worth. I actually had a student that I gave a pep talk to on prescription opioids, and it was a Monday. And on Thursday, this individual showed up in our Bellevue trauma slot after having been stabbed in the chest by another teenager in his schoolyard. And he ended up getting admitted to the hospital, but he recovered. He did well. Later on, I learned from one of the trauma surgeons and from his mother and teacher that he refused to self-administer the morphine in the pump that he was given. And he also refused to take any of the Vicodin that he was sent home with because he did not want to get addicted. Now, initially, I first felt bad that this poor boy who was stabbed in the chest was perhaps not getting adequate pain control, but just knowing that, unfortunately, this is the story of many people that become addicted to these extremely, extremely habit-forming drugs. I thought, well, you know what? If maybe we prevented a lifelong future addiction, then, it was all worth it. Next slide. So the teachers that we speak to have, constantly given us positive feedback. They tell us they love our program. They can see how valued their kids feel to have a doctor in the classroom answering their questions and how engaged their students are. And really what we've found from speaking to teachers and counselors and administrators, even at the highest level of the DOE, is that they're all starving for high quality drug education delivered by experts. Next slide. And for our doctors, it's also a pretty meaningful experience. It reminds them of the value of their expertise, their ability to actually truly make a difference, and that connects them back to their work. Next slide. So, 2020, I don't know where to start, but certainly COVID-19 laid bare the unprecedented need for doctors and other health experts to educate the public to prevent, the spread of this highly infectious virus. And we also felt it was our mandate to respond and adapt to meet that need. Next slide. So we ultimately shifted our model as quickly as we could to one that gets our doctors into schools, to a virtual model that brought our docs into Zoom classrooms with remote students, teachers, and counselors. And so far this year, we've given at least 18 talks to over 1,300 participants. Next slide. Now I'm going to breeze through these slides pretty quickly, just because really just a preview of what the lessons kind of tend to look like. So our COVID-19 pep talk, next slide. We start by just saying, obviously this is real, but that we understand that one's perception of this pandemic is largely shaped by their lived experience and by media consumption. And so we're constantly trying to meet people where they're at and understand why they behave in certain ways, right? And why they're reticent to do some of the things that have been recommended. So next slide. We're again constantly working to build trust and say that we're not here to tell you what to do, but just to keep you safe, healthy, and out of the emergency room. And actually, I think that, Jesse, if you want to just like scroll through some of these slides here, just like a couple seconds on each. We review transmission and how things have evolved over the course of the pandemic. We review how one of the reasons why the pandemic has gotten so out of control is because you don't even know when you're sick and when you're able to give it to someone else. And yet an overwhelming percentage of these transmissions are occurring when people feel fine. Next slide. We talk about ways to stop the spread, and we go into depth into each one. Next slide. And really even try to help people to appreciate how each of these things in concert, like together, really help to keep everyone safe. We talk about masks. We acknowledge how uncomfortable masks are and how annoying they are, but that for our hospital and healthcare providers, it is the only thing that we feel keeps us safe and healthy, and we keep those things on for 8, 10, and 12 hours without touching them, without drinking, without eating, because we know that it's what is protecting us. We go through again cases, real cases of some young people that have gotten very sick from COVID. And next slide, the health implications and how COVID has individually impacted each of the patients that we've seen. Next slide. And we just touch a little bit on the mental health impact, which for our young people is really the way that they're being negatively impacted by this pandemic, more than the physical implications. Just kind of acknowledging that, giving them some tips and strategies for getting through the day and to keeping a positive mood, and just acknowledging if you're feeling anxious, if you're feeling guilty, this is normal. Right? This is normal. And then lastly, I would say that, right now, again, with this rapidly evolving situation, the opportunity that we're soon all going to have to access vaccines, we're really going head on to address vaccine hesitancy, because, it's a travesty to me that there were a number of people that were first in line for the vaccine that refused it. Because of fear. And that's a fear that I can very much relate to, because I had my own fears and concerns before I got the vaccine. But we're, having seen the doctors in my institution that I trust, that I deeply respect, that I know that they were going to review the literature and make a sound decision, and seeing them getting their vaccine allowed me to feel comfortable getting mine. And I hope that people will see me having gotten my vaccine and feel the same way. So that's the next frontier for us, speaking to young people, speaking to, young and old people alike. Next slide. I think that I've just got one or two more. Prior to the pandemic, we had partnered with, dozens of schools. This year, we partnered with at least a dozen more. Our goal has always been to try to blanket the New York City public school system with what we offer. Obviously, as the largest health education, school education system in the country, it's a huge endeavor. We'll take a lot of resources and additional logistical work But that is our goal. And, again, some of that has to do with streamlining everything for everyone, because we have a ton of supply. We have a ton of doctors that are interested in doing this, and we have a ton of schools that are interested, but it's just a matter of pairing them up. So my second to last slide is just a preview of our website. I would encourage all of you to go to our website, which provides an opportunity for schools to sign up for pep talks, which we schedule weekly. It's NYCPEP.org. And that's it. So I think I went a little bit over. I apologize. I appreciate all of your patience and attention, and I'm happy to answer any questions if there's time. And if not, I understand, because I think I spoke at length.
No, it's terrific. Really, it's an amazing program. I'll turn this over to the committee. I'll turn it over to my co-chair first, Kit. I don't know if you have a question for Dr. Laskowski at this point. But I'll let you take a lead on it.
Yeah, no, I do have a question. Thank you for the presentation and for all of the really, really important work that you and your team are doing. So critical. I'm curious what you see as sort of like the major obstacles to scaling your organization's work are right now. Is it, more staff to be able to coordinate more pep talks? Is it more funding to be able to support the work that you're doing? Is it identifying more doctors? Is it managing the logistics of scheduling? What are the things that are getting in the way of you reaching more and more students?
I think that everything you mentioned are some of those obstacles, just to identify the ones that are more prominent than others. And also to add one, at this point, I think the scheduling has always been a challenge. So each school has an individual schedule. The pandemic has forced middle and high school students remotely, and there's some scheduling opportunities as well as additional challenges. So that's part of it, the scheduling, matching up when the schools are able to receive the talk and when our doctors are able to provide it. Certainly, we have received funding in the past. We do get support from the Bellevue Association, and that supports some of our work, but certainly not enough to pay for a full-time program manager, really. So we definitely could benefit from that. Even just getting the word out to schools to let them know that we are offering this. And we can probably do better even on a shoestring budget. We have had some conversations with the Department of Education at the highest level, and they have offered to put, what we offer in newsletters. I don't know how much penetrance that's gotten through to the community. I've given at least 3 talks to probably a total of 200 substance abuse counselors who have very well received even the COVID talk, right? And because we're just doing COVID for now and we'll pivot back, and all of them want so badly to get this into their school, and yet there's some sort of disconnect, and whether it's scheduling, whether they have to get approval, it is a challenge. It is a bit of a challenge, but I think that if more schools knew that what we had was available, that would be a huge step for us.
Good. But Katie, you have a question? Thank you.
Yeah, again, Doctor, thank you for this presentation. It's really been fascinating. And I have to confess, actually, so I was the president of the Manhattan High School PTA presidents. And we used to invite all sorts of people to come in and talk to us so that then all of the schools that we represent would hear. And I have to confess, I had never heard of you before. So I think that's a group of people, if PTA presidents hear about you, I think they would really be trying to help get you into the schools too. So I will definitely try and make a connection there and have them invite you to come speak. But I guess I wanted to know specifically, it sounds like the pep talks are pretty much targeted. Is it just to high school students, or do you also do it for middle school or even younger?
Yeah, I would say that middle and high school is our target audience. So definitely middle school. And I've had people tell me I think that elementary school is a little bit early, maybe 5th grade, but certainly I think that middle school is the perfect age for the talks that we're giving. And we try to, we go all the way up to 12. Sometimes when you get to the 12th graders, when it comes to drug education, they've already have established their beliefs about certain drugs and their risks. Yeah, middle and high school. But I've been told by people that even these conversations to adult audiences make sense. One of our doctors, Dr. Catherine Janes, she was a parent of a student at the New York City, at the Lab Middle School. And she spoke to the PTA as a parent and a doctor about vaping. So last year we did a bunch of parent talks on vaping as well.
That's great to hear. Yeah, I think that's a great audience for you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions from the committee? Because I have one question, Dr. Laskowski. We have students who you might say are not in, let's say, regular home environments. A lot of our families are in hotels, temporary housing, that sort of thing. Do you find that you're reaching out to that segment of our students, as well as students who are in, you might say, regular home environments? Or are you having a problem with that, or are you reaching out to those students also?
When we communicate when we promote our talks, we're really promoting them to the schools directly so that the schools can coordinate and plan the talks for their students. So we're not reaching students on an individual or families on an individual basis. There have been times, at least a couple times, where we've done talks using Eventbrite. We partnered with a parent group, Parents Against Vaping, and we had an event at the hospital that was more of an open to the public presentation and event, but we've always communicated through school counselors, teachers, and principals directly to do it during school hours. Now, maybe we have to think outside of the box, and maybe that, as Kit, maybe you mentioned about the scheduling, maybe that's one of the things that we have to move past as a roadblock to reaching more people. I don't know how many kids want to be on Zoom at night listening to me talk about COVID, but or vaping, or at marijuana edibles, maybe more for that. I don't know. Anyway.
Thanks. Any questions? We do have some folks.
Ellen, you have Maria and Judith with their hand raised.
Oh, okay. Maria.
Oh, my mic is off. You guys heard me coughing. I apologize.
No, cover your mouth.
Yeah, I did, but with my hand, not my elbow. But I was laughing at something someone said. But I wrote down my questions because I just have a few of them. That was a really interesting presentation, by the way. And I appreciated you sharing about yourself. Most people who come and speak, they don't share about themselves. So I appreciated that. I'm kind of curious about the demographics of the students you are reaching. So I saw, you showed, apparently you give the students a survey, I guess, after. Do you give a survey before and after?
Yeah, we did that survey was done with students at Essex Street Academy High School in the Lower East Side. And we did it before and after. And they received, actually, ESA has always been our one of our best partners. We always pilot our talks with them. And in the beginning, we were giving them the entire curriculum. So we would give them all 6 drug education lessons that we had. And we were doing sex education at the time too. And so we did a pre and post after they got all 6 lessons.
Okay. And then thinking about all the talks that you've given, I'm curious about the demographics of the students that you are reaching.
Thank you for that question. Our goal has always been to give our talks first and foremost to public school students. And that's pretty much how we, decide who we're speaking to. One of the things that's been a limiting factor for us in the past, and that's been a frustrating limiting factor, has been the distance from our institution in Manhattan. So we've gotten requests for schools, for example, in central Brooklyn. We've gone so far as the Far Rockaways, but that ended up being a 7-hour day. So we, but actually the fact that we are now able to deliver our talks virtually has opened up the doors and like taken down that barrier when it comes to reaching students and schools in places that are more difficult for us to reach starting out in Manhattan.
Are you able to reach a lot of students in Title I schools?
Yes, I mean, there's no question about that. But again, it's really just been a matter of who has heard about our program and who's reaching out to us.
And I'm curious at all, when you do reach out to schools, do you feel like there's a resistance for you guys to come and present?
Almost never.
Perfect. Okay. And when you speak with students, it's just a one-time session that you speak with the students?
Right. Right. Anywhere from 40 minutes to an hour. And again, like the presentation is the framework for just an ongoing conversation. So, we're constantly asking the students questions and just encouraging and facilitating their questions and participation as much as possible. So it's really an opportunity, like we think of it as a 40-minute to an hour-long opportunity for them to be in a room with a doctor who they can trust, who they can ask questions to about anything. And believe me, they ask us and are forthcoming, telling us about any number of things. I had a student who, I don't know if I want to take the time, but I'll try to keep.
You could say it briefly. You could say it briefly.
Very briefly. I had this wonderful student who I actually knew was going to see a psychiatrist. Sometimes she would miss class and go to see a psychiatrist. So I knew she had some, mental health issues. And the talk we were giving was on cold and cough medicine. So robo-tripping, if anyone's heard of that, there's something called lean, which is a codeine cough medicine concoction. Anyway, so we're doing cold and cough medicine. She walks in the room. She says, "Oh, I love robo-tripping." So I'm like, "Oh, that's interesting." Okay. Knowing that she might be on a medication, an antidepressant, like what are called SSRIs, and how they have a very, very life-threatening interaction. The dextromethorphan that's in cold medicine with SSRI. So I just started asking her, do you take any medications? She's like, "Oh yeah, I'm on Zoloft." And it's like, "Okay, well, did you know that if you are on that and you overdose on cough medicine, that you could actually get really sick? It's called serotonin toxicity." She's like, "Oh, I've heard of that. Yeah, serotonin toxicity, but it's fine. I know what I'm doing." And so then I'm giving her the talk. And so like midway through the talk, she's like, "Well, what about mushrooms? Like, are mushrooms okay?" And I'm like, "Well, they have the same effect on serotonin." And so whatever. At the end of the talk, she came up to me, she was like, "Maybe I'll just smoke weed." And I was like, "Okay." Making progress.
That's wonderful.
I thought so.
Yeah, making progress. 2 last quick questions. How big is your team, and do other hospitals do this?
Yeah, so my team is constantly evolving. My team is really, I have a separate mechanism by which we're constantly communicating what we're doing to our medical students, to the doctors in our emergency department, pediatrics department. And not only at NYU, we started partnering, like I said, with Columbia's pediatrician residency program, and even with the emergency department at Methodist in Brooklyn. And so, we have a separate means by which we're, taking this supply of doctors who are interested and pairing them up with talks that we're giving in the future. We have a talk set up for a high school in Long Island City at the end of February called the Academy for Careers in Television and Film. It's a phenomenal school. It's really wonderful school. And they actually asked for doctors of color to speak, and we were able to do that very easily. So looking forward to doing that at the end of February.
Thank you.
Thank you. Judith, did you have a question?
Thank you, Alan. Doctor, I really do appreciate, but Maria answered every single question I was thinking about. Those were the ones of Maria. We think alike. Great minds, Maria, we think alike. But I did wonder what you said Zoom has increased your accessibility to schools. And so that's a good thing. So do you need more funding to get more to schools? I mean, you can tape your meetings and then they could, I mean, I think that's wonderful that Zoom has increased your ability to get to schools.
Yeah, again, I think that the coordinate, so one thing when you said in terms of like recording our talks, I think that we could do that and probably reach more students, but I've always been reluctant to do that because I think of our talks as a two-way conversation. And I think that even though the material may be the same, the content may be the same, that the person on the receiving end having a static talk, it just might not hit in the same way. But it's something that has been recommended to me before. And again, if it's about reach, you know, then it's something to take into consideration. Although again, it's all about value and it's about, you know, quality and having the impact we're hoping to have. The ability to pair, again, the schools with the schedule and all that takes a lot of work. That's the heavy lift. You know, the doctors don't get paid, you know, to deliver their talks. They do it because it, again, motivates and inspires them in other ways. But we certainly are struggling when it comes to being able to do all that coordination with the limited funds that we do have.
Thank you for your work.
Thanks.
Thank you, Judith. Leslie, you have a question for Dr. Laskowski?
Yeah, Dr. Laskowski, thank you so much for coming. My friend, one of my good friends, is an emergency room physician, and it's a different animal. You guys are, I don't know, unbelievable. But it was a simple question. So what can we do for you? Like, can we connect you with our district leaders or our high school principals, and maybe Kit and Alan, who are the chairs, will kind of touch upon this. But do you need us to kind of be a connector or something?
Yeah, I think that would definitely help. If more people knew about our program and we had more principals reaching out to us, more people, like at this point, it's interesting. There are these ebbs and flows. Last year, pre-pandemic, we definitely could not meet the need of schools were constantly reaching out to us, and we had to turn schools down for the geographic reasons, and then also because we just didn't have enough time. Now, at the beginning, there were a bunch of schools that you know, signed up, and we were struggling to meet that need. And now there's been like a lull where even though a bunch of these, like over 150 school counselors know about our program, there's still like we have talks that we offer, probably 5 talks a week, and they're just not being filled, you know, that we're not getting the requests from schools. So certainly letting schools know about the program that we have would be definitely a huge help. I think also if anyone here had ideas for, you know, ways that we can raise more funding so that we could, you know, afford a full-time program manager. I have 2 lovely pre-medical post graduate students who are doing, like, they do a lot of work for us, and they're doing it unpaid, off the books, just because it's they enjoy the work. I would love to be able to give them something for the work that they do for us.
Cool. Well, I think outreach is important, funding is important. The city, of course, is going through its difficulties, but you know, there are places we can reach out to. Perhaps we'll discuss that with the committee at the end of this. Just wanted to check with the committee if anybody else has a question before I go over to the attendees. Okay. Christine, Beth, I did want, before I go to Christine, I did want to recognize a few of our elected representatives that are here. Carl Wilson is here. Mia Berlo is here. Emily Berstak is here. If you wish to ask questions or comment, please raise your hand. And I'll go to Christine now. Thank you. Welcome. Welcome to ACES, Christine. Unmute yourself.
Just an amazing program. I had a question about how you, at the beginning, started to establish the contact with the schools. You know, at what level did you reach them, and how did you do that? Because that's a mystery to me.
So Dr. Goldfrank, who I mentioned at the beginning of my talk, who has been a mentor to me, a mentor to hundreds of others, and is really an intellectual powerhouse, a moral compass for my department for years. He, an old school, I don't know for lack of a better term, he said on day one, you know, we have to, and he's always said, we have to prevent all the cases for everybody, right? Okay, sure, Dr. Goldfrank, I'll just do that on the weekends. I'll figure that out. But, you know, we knew that we wanted to start with young people, and we knew that we were going to try to reach the highest levels of the Department of Education. So he called up Dr. Roger Platt, who was at the time the chief medical officer of the Department of Education, who just happened to be Dr. Goldfrank's former residency colleague. And he hadn't seen them in 40 years, but somehow managed to get in his office, and we had a meeting with him. And we really had a pie in the sky concept at the time. This was 5 years ago. We didn't have anything fully formed, but said that we were committed to working with schools to have our doctors provide education and to figure out, you know, what was the most important thing to talk to students about. And then again, at the time, there was not really a fully formed concept. The Department of Education was very gracious with us with that partially formed idea. They said, and again, this was at the head of the Office of School Wellness Programs, which is one of the, you know, the departments within the Department of Education siloed around school health. They said that they were going to connect us with schools, and ultimately that proved to be a lengthy process, right? They were trying to identify schools. They had a number of things on their plate, and months went by. And I reached out to a good friend of mine who was a teacher at Essex Street Academy and said, hey, I want to talk about drugs. Can I talk to your kids about drugs? And he was like, are you kidding me? You want to bring doctors into our school to talk to kids about drugs? Absolutely, because I'm the one that's talking to these kids about drugs and alcohol. I would never touch alcohol or drugs in my life, and I have no idea what I'm doing, so great. So that's actually how we got started. And then it was really like, we started at Essex, and then we just moved on from, the Bellevue used to have a school health program at four high schools in a building called the Murray, now I'm blanking on it. But anyway, it was just piece by piece. We started partnering with schools. We got linked up with the SAPIS counselors. SAPIS stands for Substance Abuse Prevention and Intervention Specialists. We gave them, their entire staff, a training using our Pep Talks curriculum, and they wildly supported it. And so that's been a mechanism through which we get into schools through the substance counselors. So that was really the process. Not fully coordinated, but that's how we got to where we are.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We could probably talk on this all evening, I'm sure. It's fantastic, it really is. I'll come back to the committee now for any further questions or comments, or any follow-up, any motion for any additional outreach that we want to make on behalf of this program.
Alan, I'll just say, obviously, I'll be happy to work with anybody on the committee, and obviously Larissa, in terms of what we can do. And you know,
I think we can get the word out through the principals, through the district office, and get hopefully as things lighten up, as students get back into school, it might be easier to even reach out to them at this point. So great. Just a plug for Bellevue Hospital. If God forbid anybody is ever in need of an emergency room, that is the place to tell your ambulance driver or someone who's taking you to go to. Dr. Goldfrank, the father of emergency medicine, doctors that graduated from that are running emergency rooms all over the world out of Bellevue Hospital. It's a terrific.
I'm working on Thursday. Your eye on the knife and wear your seatbelt in the back of yellow caps.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Lekowski. We're going to move on.
There's a question in the chat from one of the
There is?
principals.
Oh, actually, thank you, because you did mention in the chat that I didn't want to put somebody on the spot, but if there's a principal in the audience that wants to speak, please.
I can read the question, Alan. It's from Susanna Tenney, and she's wondering how many students PEP works with at a time, Dr. Lekowski?
So, you know, pre-pandemic, when we were in a classroom, it would be whatever classroom, and we've done some auditoriums. So done a group as large as 150 students. With Zoom, initially we were not sure if we could have that large of a capacity, but in fact, we've had groups over 100 and it's worked out fine. So we're really very flexible. We prefer to have more than 15 students because when there's less than 15, maybe 2 show up. That's been sadly, as if there's any teachers on this call, have experienced the unfortunate lack of students always showing up in class, but we can do pretty large numbers of students at a given time.
That's actually the principal from Landmark High School who asked that question.
Thank you for coming. Cool, we're going to move on, I guess, at this point. Thank you again, Dr. Lekowski.
Thank you guys all so much.
So we're going to move on. Our next item on the agenda is the survey. Hopefully you all had a chance to look at it. Jesse, are you going to post it on the screen? You want to run through it?
I can post it if that's what you like me to do.
I think maybe just give a run through. I think see what sort of comments or adjustments. Christina's here to guide us through this. Thank you. And perhaps give it a day or two. You can send in your comments and edits to this in the next day or so. We'll turn it over to the Street Life Committee to do a fine tune on this and try to get it back to transportation so they can finalize it for their committee and get it to back to the office so we can get this out. We had a great response earlier to our survey to the district needs, and we're looking forward to getting this out to the community. It's an important topic, street life, street maintenance. Walking on the street is becoming a little bit of a difficulty lately with everything going on. So Jesse, you want to put this on the screen, just have folks in the audience also have a look at it if they haven't been able to. Christine, since you're here,
Yes.
you want to run through this for us?
Sure. I think, I mean, you have been in the snow for the last few days, and so you know what's going on in the streets. And in transportation, we have been talking a lot about the lack of maintenance, you know, on the sidewalks and the lack of maintenance during the snow, etc. And rather than sending a letter with our concern, we thought it would be interesting to collect from the community a little bit of wider perception of what's going on. I mean, we may think everything is horrible, and then people say, well, no, it's not that bad, you know. So getting a real check of what people feel and perceive out of the situation is what we try to do. So the first 3 lines because of 3 questions because of Jesse. Jesse told me, why don't you ask like some general questions? So here are the general question. You know, do you like the quality of the sidewalks, and do you think the city is doing a good job in maintaining the walking? And then further down, if you can scroll down somehow, you know, and do you think the city is doing a good job in clearing the snow? So if nobody answers anything else, at least we will have those 3 questions as an overall perception of what's going on here. And then we start to go a little deeper. Right, so we are talking first about normal conditions, the repairs, right? Do you trip? Is it accessible? The corner ramps? Do you have a lot of obstruction on the sidewalks? And are too many people on the sidewalk? And then you have to walk in the street. Is it dirty? When it rains, do you have the water ponding at the crossing? And there are multiple ways to report those issues. Did you report the problem? And then if you place no, it's going to take you to the snow questions. And if you say yes, it's going to take you to this set of questions. I don't know how it's going to work if you don't say, if we say yes, you would have to select yes to see. Right. So we're asking us example of complaint they made recently. Obviously, we don't want to be too burdensome and say, give us all the list of complaints and then, tell us who you reported to, just to give us a sense of stuff. And whether the problem was resolved and whether they are happy with it or not. That's pretty much it. And then on the snow, we're asking pretty much the same question. What percentage of the sidewalk was cleared of snow? How wide is the path on the sidewalk? Want to go down a little bit, right? How many of the ramps of corner are cleared? How long does it typically take for the sidewalk to be clear? Is the bus stop clear? And how long it typically for the bus stop to be cleared? And then the same story about the reporting. Did you report anything and did you send it out? Then we get to the next one. Right, the same questions there. So hopefully it's not too big, too long. And hopefully, Alan is giving us very good feedback. And here we are asking them, but none of the question is required, by the way, and hopefully people feel comfortable responding to that.
Cool. Well, thanks, Christine. Folks, any comments, any questions?
I think it should be a little bit shorter. It seems like so long, Christine. I know people have survey overload because when I get to the second page, I'm like done. Mm-hmm. Is there a way you could do it shorter? Mm-hmm. Sorry.
Okay, no, that's a good comment. Every little bit helps. Blake, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, thank you, Christine, for drafting this survey. I'm really interested in the results. I just had a couple of small suggestions. One is, on the first page with the 3 overview questions, I wonder if it would be more effective to have it be categories, very poor, poor. Just wondering in the reporting on this, it might be more compelling to say like 80%, find it poor or very poor, rather than, saying that we're at a 28 out of 100, to try to make those categories a little more
Oh, yeah, we could do that. The reason I choose that glider is I felt it was kind of simple and easy to put there, but we can do that, yes.
Or often there's a survey format with multiple categories across horizontally and then little circles below them, and you can just choose one to categorize it.
Okay.
The other one that I was particularly interested in is the obstructions on the sidewalk. And I wonder if for some of the open-ended, obviously optional areas, if we can be a little more specific about that particular question. And what I mean is, the obstructions on the sidewalk, we currently say, tell us more, but, I wonder if we can ask what types of obstructions, are you referring to, or, what type of obstructions you find problematic. That was all, and thank you again.
Okay.
Thank you, Blake. Kit?
Also very eager to see the data that the survey is going to collect. Thank you for walking us through, Christine. I was curious if you considered collecting even more demographic information. I agree with Judith. Every survey is too long, but at the same time, it might be interesting to be able to see, are there disparities, are there trends in certain racial groups, ethnic groups? I know you're asking about age, I know you're asking about disability, but I wonder if there's more demographic information that could give us sort of a even fuller picture.
Okay, I'll think about that. You know, yeah, I'll think about that, more demographic.
Thank you, Kit. Sabrina, you have a question, comment?
Yeah, just a question in terms of the process. So I agree this is absolutely very needed and it's the best way to show the problems that we have. But are we gonna just do the same as we do with the budget request? That we do it every year. We're gonna send it to the community leaders and the block associations. How are we gonna make sure that the survey is complete?
So my thought was, and I didn't ask Jesse's approval yet, but my thought was that we would send an e-blast to everybody. We would definitely send a separate email I would send a separate email to all the block association. I was thinking of putting it on Twitter and getting people to respond on Twitter, hopefully put it on Street's blog and have them, you know, get the input from that. These people are very clued into that.
Yeah, if I have a question, I know we have a few, or, you know, newspapers or local magazines as well.
Oh yeah, and to them too.
Great.
Yeah, all of that. I mean, so we'll try to do as much as possible, you know, as far as reaching a large audience. And then people in CB7 told me they want to send it out, you know, so which is one of the reasons I asked for the zip code, because that may not be all our neighborhood, but you know, I think this is something that could be used in other neighborhoods. And if people ask me, I'll be only too happy to share it with them.
Thank you. Jessica, did you have your hand raised?
No, I'm good. This is great.
You're good? Okay. Jesse, you have your hand raised.
Yeah, I was thinking about it with Judith's point. You know, it's always difficult because you want to get as much information as possible. So one thing I was while I was going through it right there, I do think it helps psychologically if you just know where you are in the survey. So if there is something at the top that says, you know, you're at, you know, 50% done, or 3 out of 5 or whatever it is, however you want to describe it, it does give people a little bit, okay, I got 2 more pages that I'm good, right? Rather than going, I don't know, am I pressing next and there's going to be another 7 pages. So
I think there is an option for that.
Yes, I think that just helps, you know, when you're filling it out your own, just, you know, time management. And I do think we should be wary of maybe requiring some of the identifying information required, just because I certainly don't, you know, I want to make sure that we, you know, I think we get the information we want for our district and it doesn't get, you know, if we're going to do a broad, you know, rollout of this, I just don't want it to get sort of then like some subgroup, you know, filling up with one particular issue or whatever, and you were like, then we're all stuck with a lot of information that actually isn't directly what we're looking for. So whether it be a zip code or I don't know, some of the information, maybe the name, or an email, so there's no sort of duplication or anything like that, or anything like that. That's my only suggestion on that end.
I wanted to follow up on the short versus long and whatever. Do you think it would be viable to split it into sidewalk and then snow? Or it loses some value? I mean, I've been thinking about that to try to make it shorter, but I'm not, I don't know. I'm not sure which way is best.
Good, it's a good question. Some folks might just like to take the survey, get it over with, and, you know, just go on to doing something else
That's
rather
what I
than, oh,
thought.
another survey kind of thing, you know, but.
Well,
I think there might be a
Think about it.
concern of crossover too, where you're saying asking about obstructions. Someone's obstruction could be the snow, and then
Right.
then they have a whole nother section. And so I do think if you want to do something, if you want to include them both, I think you want to make sure that there's a clear understanding. There's a snow portion, or I don't know, you know.
I feel like
Think
it's
about it.
also an order of importance. So, you know, if you collect all of the information that you need to evaluate the survey, meaning things like the zip code up front, you know, then you could collect partial responses as well. You know, respondents wouldn't necessarily have to fill out the snow section if they don't want to.
Okay, these are good ideas to think about.
That's true.
Well, it also, you also ask the questions to commuters, because people who work in the district are affected by this too.
Yeah.
Well, if they're on Twitter, if they're on whatever medias we put this in, they'll get it. Thank you, David. Katie, did you have a question?
Yeah, just two things. I think pretty early on, I forget, maybe the second page, you refer to the ramps. And on a later page, you refer to the ramps/corners. I think both times you should refer to ramps/corners, because I don't think people always understand what you mean by ramps.
Right.
So anyway, I would just mention that. And also to the point about people being wary of taking a long survey, I think it's, at least I have found it very helpful if something right at the front of a survey says, you know, would you be willing to take this 7-minute survey? Like if you tell people about how long it is, it's, at least for me, I'm like, oh, 7 minutes, okay. You know, but if I feel like, oh my gosh, there are all these pages, it's probably 30 minutes, I just stop. So I think it is helpful to give somebody an idea about how long it's going to be. And by the way, I don't think you should split into the 2 different surveys. I think you should just keep it in one and go. But anyway, that's my thought. Thanks,
Katie.
That's
Thank
helpful.
you. Maria, you have a comment, question?
I was just going to ask Christine a quick question. How many minutes, do you know how many minutes it would be to take it the way it is now?
How long does it take?
We can't hear you.
Hear me? How many minutes, do you know how many minutes it would take to do the survey?
This one is
permanently?
about 7, yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I would just, I think Katie had a good suggestion. That's always helpful before I do a survey. Yeah.
All right, cool.
Christine, are you expecting everyone to complain, and then at the end when it says, have you ever reported this, everyone's going to say no?
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
That's fully what I'm expecting. I think people are going to say no, and then they skip to the next. So therefore, it's much shorter, right? Because people are going to say no. Where am I supposed to report that, right? Yeah. Which is one of the things that we want to expose, that there is no place to report those things.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. If I could ask everybody, if you wouldn't mind, all these great suggestions and ideas, if you can put them in an email.
Alan, we have Katie Savage in the attendee.
Yeah. You just wanted to.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
Before I forgot to ask. So, you know, take a moment, you know, next day or so, put your thoughts down into an email. So send it to Jesse, Kit, and myself, and we'll get it over to the Street Life Committee, and then we'll shift it over to Christine, and we'll come up with a great survey. And we're going to go over to Katie. Katie Savage, please.
Hello.
Hi, Katie.
I just had a question because I saw one of the survey questions regarding snow mentioned asking the city's response to snow removal on sidewalks. I just wanted to maybe clarify, because some people in the general public might not know, the city is not responsible for clearing sidewalks.
Right.
Is that something that would?
No, I know that. But still, at the end of the day, you know, if you ask the city, I mean, there is a 311 complaint that says that after 96 hours, potentially the Department of Sanitation will send people.
Okay, so you mean it more as the city responding to businesses not clearing it versus sanitation. I just want to be clear because with all the snow we've been having, there have been a lot of complaints about bike lanes and areas not cleared. And, you know, I went out shoveling last Monday. I was shoveling Friday, did some shoveling Saturday in the neighborhood. And when I was talking to a supervisor from the local garage, they cleared portions of the bike lane on 9th Avenue 5 times, and businesses kept pushing snow back into the bike lanes. I just don't want this to end up being a like let's everybody dump on Department of Sanitation kind of thing. And I don't know if it makes sense for people to know that it's businesses that are shoveling the actual sidewalks.
We can't specifically say that because we don't know, right? So we don't know a lot of things. The net is that if I'm a pedestrian and there is a lot of snow and it's in front of a closed business, I know that's because the business is closed. But if somebody is slipping, you know, we are asking their impressions, okay? We're not asking them to complain about one place or another.
Okay, I didn't mean specific businesses. I just meant as far as sanitation versus the city checking into businesses not doing it.
But sanitation is the city, so we are asking generally about the city, you know?
Okay. Okay.
I don't think that's going to be that bad, but yes, 9th Avenue is a problem, big problem. And there are places on 9th Avenue where the restaurant have set up in a way that nobody can pass through to clear the bike lane.
Correct.
So that's another problem. We understand that.
Well, again, it's all we want to get some feedback. We want to get some general feedback, some specific feedback, so we can go further to sanitation, transportation on this. So
we want to get sanitation a lot of money. So we need we need people to complain.
Yeah, that's it.
You know, people complaining is a good news for a budget.
Okay. All right, so we're gonna move. Christine, thank you for taking us through this. This will be a great survey. And again, please send your questions and comments in, and we'll get this put together.
Thank you for all the advice. That's good.
ACES and transportation. All right. Thank you.
Bye.
So we're going to shift over back to education. I'm going to turn this over to Kit. We've got a great presentation coming up, and Kit, all yours.
Man, I feel like you just oversold me by more than a little bit. So, hi everybody. Last agenda item of the night is to go back to the discussion around middle school and high school admissions policy changes that the New York City DOE now not so recently made, and how we want to engage in the conversations going on about whether those policies should be made permanent, should things go back to the way that they were. Folks may remember there was an optional meeting to discuss what we want the ed group to do here. It was attended by Josephine, Katie, Leslie, Mercedes, and Sarah. Coming out of that conversation, where we landed was we'd like to do a forum similar to the forum that we did on reopening schools. We're hoping to potentially do it at next month's March meeting. Folks who attended that small sort of planning meeting, please chime in before we sort of open this up to everybody else. But there are a couple of big takeaways for me. One was a point that Katie made about community input has really not been a part of decision-making around admissions policies. In particular, the decision that the mayor's office made to try and get rid of the test to get into the specialized high schools. And so this forum could be a way for us to make sure that doesn't happen again. The other big piece is we sort of have to make a decision about what we want the scope of the discussion to be. We have some sort of draft goals for the forum, but there was conversation in the small group about, do we want to just focus on middle school? Do we want to talk about middle school and high school? Do we want to, potentially bring in other things? I think the group landed on not doing that. But the draft goals at this point are to have a forum where we would, one, provide community with helpful information about how middle school and potentially high school admissions processes have temporarily changed. Number two, engage in a constructive dialogue about the benefits and drawbacks of making the recent changes to admissions permanent. And three, collect the data and perspectives necessary for our committee to develop its stance on what the policy should be in the future. For that last piece, I think it's a combination of the dialogue that happens in the forum, and then hopefully we can do some of the sort of surveying in real time that we did with our first go around. I guess one final thought, the word constructive dialogue really needs to be emphasized. This is a very complex, controversial, and sensitive topic where a lot of people have valid concerns and very divergent viewpoints. And so we do want to make sure that similar to last time, if we do a forum, we pretty tightly manage it and we set expectations around how folks are talking about these issues so that we don't end up having this be something that we lose control over. But I will stop talking. Other folks who are at the meeting, anything that you want to add?
Excuse me. Thanks, Kit. I think that was a great summary. And I really liked what you had said at the last meeting when you first introduced this topic about the fact that it's, it's really complex issues and people can, with really good intentions, can be coming at it from very different perspectives. And to the point that you acknowledged about my concern that community input at least wasn't involved before the decision was made about potentially getting rid of the specialized high school exam. I have to imagine that there's likely to be some task force or group of somewhere in the city being put together to be thinking about this, not just within the DOE, but maybe something bigger. I don't know if, I guess I'm just wondering if we can also write a letter to the electeds and to say, if you're involved in decision-making, can you please make sure that parents and teachers and people actually at some of these schools, you know what I mean? Like that they all get involved. Like, I think we should not just be doing some of our own talking, but to make sure that it's a broader conversation. So I guess I would propose, but maybe we can do that letter after we hold our forum. But I do think that we should be reaching out and encouraging that to just make sure that lots of voices are involved at the higher level. And I guess my question about our role, because obviously there's the CEC for District 2. Do we host some, like, do we ask them if they want to host this forum with us, or do we, I don't know. I guess I'm just wondering sort of how do we work with them, or how do we collaborate together?
Yeah, it's a good question. What we did last time was we invited a member of the CEC to be part of the panel. So that it wasn't sort of co-hosted, but they were represented.
Okay.
Totally open to suggestions about doing it a different way this time around. But I think that was sort of like an elegant solution to making it our event, but also working in collaboration with another body.
Oh, that sounds good. Okay. Thanks.
Kid, I have a question, but I did want to answer a question in the question. There's a question regarding growing homeless population in CB4. I just want to mention that that would probably be a better question to our HHHS Housing Human Triple HS Committee, which is going to be meeting. When is it going to be meeting?
Thursday, February 18th.
Thursday, the 18th. And that would be the place that. And they've been working on this for quite a while. So I had a question. Do you think there's a difference in the effect of changing the system on middle schools and high schools? Do you think there's a difference on how the students react to it, to this kind of a change in some way? Is that something that might be a topic of discussion?
Are you asking me?
Anybody, not you. Yes, you can answer. Why not? Go ahead.
I'm going to say I'm not sure.
Okay, good. All right, good answer.
Yes.
What do you think?
I'll quickly take a stab at that, Alan. I think the fact that we're having this conversation is an illustration of how unpredictable the outcomes of policy decisions are going to be. I don't think these policies were, definitely put in place to exacerbate segregation, which is the main criticism that many folks have about them. And here we are. And so, what will the impact of these policy changes be on students? I think we don't know what the policies are going to be, but in a world where they desegregate, there is a bunch of research that indicates that it'll benefit all students in a wide variety of ways. Will there be unforeseen negative externalities? Probably, because generally there are. What those will be, I think, takes someone with a lot more expertise on this topic than me.
All right, cool. Okay, any next steps on this, Kurt?
I see Judith has a hand and Katie put her hand back up, and then
okay.
I'd love to run through what I'm thinking for next steps. Also very open to suggestions if anybody wants to throw anything out there related to this forum. Judith, I think you were first.
Okay, I just, sorry I missed the meeting. I do appreciate this big topic. And as I think you mentioned before, the CEC District 2 has been working on this for years, and it's a volatile subject, and everybody has their strong opinions, as you did say. I think that when you go to those meetings and you participate and you hear the other side about what they have to say, and both points of the many different people that participate in those meetings, it's really valuable. And it brought me a lot of depth and understanding from my many years in high school. And plus in the elementary education with my own children, and the middle school selection, which is very tumultuous. But the one thing that I'm really concerned about, as I'm sure that you all are also, is that they're trying to eliminate the zoning for the districts. And that to me is something that should be talked about, because if they are going to eliminate that, that means then your kid, now my kids are out now, I'm done, but still it makes me concerned that some little kid might have to go someplace else far away. And that's something that they're trying to talk about in the CDC District 2, which is a controlled selection. I don't know how they're going to do it, but I think it's, the meeting again is tomorrow, and you can just Google it and anybody can come. It's, what time? It starts at 6:30. But for me, that's a really, scary question, that if they're going to eliminate all the zoning to all the schools, it's just for the districts, and it's just something that I think that maybe, I don't know how they're going to resolve it. I don't even know how they're going to figure out. They're going to put everybody in a lottery and then all the schools will just pop out. It's a very difficult question as a parent, to have little middle school kids going to, all over the place, and elementary school kids, with high school kids, they do it. And it's a big project also, but it's just, when kids come really far, 2 hours to go to school, they don't get there on time. It's very difficult. So that's just my little 2 cents. But I would highly encourage, if everybody would like to come tomorrow to the CDC, those people have been discussing this for years, and they have a lot of good information. And I know we're just touching the subject, but I think I've been going to those meetings and it's really valuable. So if you go tomorrow, I'll see you there.
It's a great suggestion, Judith. I think attending a CEC meeting is always a valuable use of time, but particularly right now, when this topic is continuing to be discussed. And also just plug the background materials that are on Dropbox, that were a combination of what we all thought would be sort of helpful to build context for what is, I think a number of people said this, very complex, very controversial. I think that Katie, you were next, so we'll go back to you and then we'll go to Maria.
So actually, Kit, it's funny, I was actually going to talk about the materials in the Dropbox. Those were super helpful. So thank you for putting those out. Yeah, I think it's great if we all can look at that. But I will say there's a piece that I thought you'd referenced, Kit, that I didn't see in the Dropbox materials that I think would be helpful to get in the Dropbox materials at some point, but also maybe include as part of our forum. So this feels like one of the issues where there may be, certainly different views on some topics, but I think there's a lot of agreement, right? That, the most segregated school district in the country, and that we all want it to be less so. But I guess what I haven't seen is like write-ups or analysis of showing how getting rid of certain things leads to desegregation, right? Or what have been effective ways in other school districts or anywhere for desegregating, right? I think what was in the Dropbox right now is just like, we are the most segregated schools, and here are all the benefits of being desegregated, but not how do you get to desegregated. So.
Yeah, it's a good push. I think you're absolutely right. I don't know how much there really is on these are the right levers to pull in terms of policies for desegregation that results in the best outcomes and experiences for students. I can do some digging and talk to some folks and try to get.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought you'd referenced somebody you knew who worked in a foundation that I thought had done some of that work. But is that the Century Foundation stuff that just shows desegregation is good, as opposed to how to get there?
Yeah, my friend who works at the Century Foundation is running a program that's basically going to bring together community groups from all over the country to come up with their own initiatives to desegregate. I don't know if they've had their first cohort. They just launched this in the past, 6 months to a year.
Okay.
Candidly, I don't think there are a lot of examples of successfully desegregating American schools. And so it's not like there's, this is the playbook, just go out and execute. And I think, part of what's challenging is the way that we've set up our, government. Localities get to pick all of the rules. And so how segregation has played out looks very different from New York to Boston to any other large city, but all of them are very segregated. And so, even if we were looking at other geographies to say, what actually led to better outcomes and experiences for students in the case studies that we have access to, those places just have different laws, different policies, different ways of operating than we do. And so I think there are CECs in the city that are moving more quickly than CEC2 has. And there's at least one that's put out, I haven't read it yet, but what I've heard is a pretty thoughtful and comprehensive strategy. So maybe we could look at that. But I don't think there's a ton of known solutions to this really challenging problem.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
I think we're going Maria, and then Leslie just raised her hand.
Kit, I just wanted to ask, looking at the documents in the Dropbox, I'm curious because it looks like quite a bit to read. What is going to be most helpful for me to read? Which 2 documents can I read that's going to have me most informed?
Yeah, great question. So I shot folks an email, and I think the best thing to do is to start with the New York Times article. It's just a really quick read that'll say this is what the Blasio administration has done, and gives helpful background for how it connects to the broader issue of the schools being really segregated in the city.
And that's the article from December, right? That's in the Dropbox and in the email, the same one?
Right, it's either December or January.
Okay.
If you read one thing, read that. And then if you want to go deeper, I would say the research that Katie mentioned from the Century Foundation is a good just like synthesis of these are all the different studies that have been done on what is the actual outcome for students in terms of their academics, in terms of how they experience school, social emotional development, when schools are more integrated. Going beyond that, there's a couple of documents in there that are like super rich, but super long. I would skim the suggestions from the sort of working group that the mayor brought together on diversity. I would skim the UCLA study. It's from a while ago, but it's the one that gets sort of cited as the evidence that our school system is the most segregated one in America.
The one titled The Civil Rights Project?
Yes. But I would say like one-stop shopping, just do the New York Times piece. If you want to go deeper, please have at it.
And just for clarity, it looks like, I didn't get to finish the New York Times article, but just for clarity for me, and if anybody else on is wondering, but it seems like they're talking about changes to the admission process for high school and middle school students, right? But it would be, there's what's the word I'm looking for? There's a greater change with the way the middle school process would be, right? I understood that correctly. All right, good. Thanks.
Leslie?
So two things. One is actually directed at Katie. Ironically, the way New York City implemented the G&T program for elementary schools was meant to desegregate, which is ironic. So what they did is when they set up the G&T programs, they put them in Title I schools because they figured that G&T students, which are predominantly white and Asian and middle or upper middle class, have income or money, and they wanted to put those G&T programs into Title I schools like PS 33, PS 111, which were what was called, schools that didn't have a lot. And they wanted to kind of balance the PTAs there a little bit. So instead of having one school that just, caters to Title I students, it would split the school, right? So they would have some PTA funds and not. Unfortunately, it's desegregating the school, but it's not desegregating the classroom, right? So the schools are desegregated, but the classrooms are still segregated. So that you're still not getting a balance. I mean, maybe with funds, you're getting more funds injected because of PTA fundraising and stuff. But anyway, that's irony there as far as the desegregation. And then I guess my question is for Alan and Kit. This is, as Judith is 100% right on the money. This is a super, super charged topic. There are a lot of layers and it's very nuanced, and it is, I mean, Judith hit it right. I mean, she hit the nail on the head as far as, what we could do with this. What is our objective? Is our objective to come out on a stance on this? Is our objective just to hold a forum to inform? Is our objective to hold a forum to have people have an outlet or ask, you know what I mean? What is our objective? Only because once we get a firm objective, I think maybe we know how we can move forward. Because this, I'm telling you, people have been screaming about this, like Judith said, on both sides of the aisle for years, and it can get very charged, and even within our district.
Yeah. Totally agree. And I dropped sort of our draft goals into the chat. Coming out of our last forum, we wrote a letter, sort of our stance on reopening schools, as well as sort of like a summary of what we heard. And I'm hoping we would do the same thing here. I, as an individual, Kit Tollerson, have thoughts and feelings about what I think that stance should be. But it's something that we're going to have to see what people say, and then we're going to have to discuss it, and we're going to have to vote on it. And so, I think there's a variety of, Sonoma, Daddy's in a meeting. Can you go back with Mom, please? Thank you. I think there's a variety of likely places we could land. One is we think these changes should become permanent. 2 is we think some of them should become permanent, but others should not. 3 is we think we should go back to the old way of doing things. And, I imagine that well-intentioned people on this committee are going to come down on different places about which one of those is the right answer. And that's why I think we should talk about this. Does that sort of answer it, Leslie?
Yes, I just foresee a lot of, yes, I think this is going to be a little more, there's going to be a little more fireworks than you think, especially with the PTA people coming in, and I mean, because they're split, and it's, I just want to know what we're getting in. Everyone knows what we're getting into. Not that we should avoid it. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying, just be aware. And I see David is nodding his head, so I'm not sure if. And
yeah,
Jess.
No. I've been to the CEC meetings where they've gotten very contentious, where at some points NYPD had to be there. So I think what we as a group need to do is meet over the course of time, come up with something. But it isn't something we should shy away from. It's really all about the presentation. So we need to come up with a good presentation. I think that's the key.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I'm sorry, Wendy's been waiting very patiently. Never mind, I apologize.
Yeah, let's go to Wendy, and then we can go to you, Jesse, and then we can go to Jessica. And then I do want to sort of cap this and get everyone out of here at a reasonable time of night. So I'll run through some next steps, unless there's other urgent things that we should make space for. Wendy?
My just really quick comment, because I am such a newcomer to this whole world, and I haven't gotten through everything that's in the Dropbox, but from what I did take a look at, what I was struck with is just, what does success look like? Obviously, we should not have segregated schools, but the nuance to what a successful desegregated school looks like, I imagine that there are lots of opinions on what that is. So, Kit, I was struck when you said that there are very few examples of other districts that have done this successfully. So I think for the forum, and to the points that Leslie and others have made around just how contentious this is, and obviously this is a multi-year issue, it may be helpful for us at the start of this forum to just acknowledge that success may look different for different people, that's not what we're trying to solve for in the forum, because I feel like that could lead to a spiral, unless we do have a sense of what some of the basics of what success should look like, and then we could set that forth, or we set that forth in the letter. So it's on the forum piece. The other just piece is, I think whatever our recommendation is, or whatever it comes out of this, I think it's worth even adding that the DOE, the city, whoever else, state, that part of however we move forward in a more permanent fashion, that it needs to be very clear how they are going to measure success, because they seemingly will be measuring something, because I think that needs to be as transparent as possible, because it's to me, that seems very muddy, very, very muddy right now. So.
Yeah, no, your first point is a really good one. I think we do need to call it out at the onset of the forum. And on your second, yes, and there isn't even an agreed upon definition of what constitutes diversity in academia, in sort of the school space. You ask, 10 experts, you're going to get 10 different definitions. And so I think we should be trying to push the DOE to define it and to be transparent about, progress towards success there. But it's another sort of really thorny aspect of this issue, is like nobody agrees on what diversity even means. So, Jessica?
I think we're going to do Jesse.
Oh, sorry, Jesse.
No, I defer back to Jessica.
Oh, well, I also I feel like Wendy may be a very much a newcomer to so many of these topics. I do wonder, I really feel what Leslie was getting at, which is just what a significant issue this is and how personal. And I'm just wondering if there's any other group that we should be partnering with, not to like, I know people still have PTSD from the NYCDOE work group, but like that was led by, you know, like who was ultimately responsible for the plan. And I think it's great to have our community feedback, and I just love that. So I'm totally in favor of that. But just to make sure that it is like managed and monitored, and that this feedback gets shepherded to the right place, and that we don't become the arbiters of, well, both safety and security, as was mentioned, but also just like where to come out on some of these issues, which might be really, really hard and hot potatoes. So I don't know, but it's just a thought to consider.
Yeah, it's a good one. I mean, I think for a forum that we're having in a month, it might be tricky to identify like who is the right partner to work on this with. But I think a good next step coming out of the forum could be, you know, in an ongoing way, we want to work with the CEC on continuing to get community input on this important issue, or we want to work with New York Appleseed, which is a nonprofit that focuses on school integration here in the city, or we want to work with someone from the Century Foundation, or we even want to, you know, send a group of folks through the cohort program that the Century Foundation has set up, which is geared towards helping local communities figure out how do they want to address segregation in their geography. And so, you know, I think we can get another group of really dynamic, really well-informed panelists by next month. I'm pretty optimistic about that. And, you know, after the forum, we actually might land in a place, Jessica, where it's like, you know what, we want to partner with one or more people or organizations to continue talking about this, because it's unlikely to be something that is quickly solved. No, it's definitely not going to be quickly solved. And this could be the first of many conversations that we're having as a committee about this.
Yeah, that sounds good. I just think we want to mitigate any overwhelm. I mean, it's maybe a little bit easier on Zoom than it would be at a public in-person town hall, but still really want to make sure that whoever is like as was said earlier, we're really clear about what we're trying to accomplish. If it's information sharing, let it be information sharing. If it's though a dialogue or kind of feedback, that it's really structured in a way that can be productive. And I'm almost reluctant to use the word controlled because we don't want it to be contrived, but you know, is just managed in a way that is good for everyone, and that everyone has their voice, you know, heard. I'm wrapping up at work, so I'm going to switch to my phone. So I'll be in and out. I mean, I'll be with you, but to change the scenery.
Yeah, point well taken, Jessica. And if anyone wants to be involved in the planning of how we manage this, for lack of a better word, you can totally join in the small group that we have going. I think we did a pretty solid job last time of tightly managing the forum. And so I think there's a lot of lessons learned there, but we'll need to do it in an even more strategic and an even more proactive way this time for sure. Jesse, do you want to defer to Sabrina and Maria, or do you want to get your 2 cents in?
No, I'll defer to the board members.
Cool. We're going to go Sabrina, then Maria.
Thank you, Jesse. I have to be super honest. Like, I know very little. I don't have any kids, or I don't know anybody who goes to school. That's how limited my word is. As in practicality of this, I do know the basics. I do know that the New York has the most segregated school system in America. I definitely am going to learn more for our next meeting, but I do want to know some technicalities in terms of what's our urgency. Is this going to be approved in this with this Department of Education? We have a new mayor coming in this fall. What's the urgency? Because I know we're talking about all of these things to do, but do we have any timeline, like time frame that we're looking for here for all these changes?
Yeah, I mean, there's a 1-year window on the current policies. So the changes that were made for only 1 year. And so if we have this conversation in March, we can be part of the community conversation about should they be permanent? Should they be partially permanent? Or should we go back to doing things the way that we did pre-pandemic? And so that's the real sort of time sensitivity. But these changes are part of a broader set of policies that together make up the system that landed us where we are. So we're talking about the changes to middle school and high school admissions. We might be talking about something still connected to this broader theme of school segregation. That's a totally different set of policies in 6 months or in 3 years. Does that answer the question? All right, we're going to go to Maria, and then I'm going to cap it with the knowledge that anyone who wants to is free to join the planning meeting that we're going to have. And we're talking about all this next month.
Just quick question. If it came up earlier, do we know, is there a task force or a working group like on the city level related to this?
So there's an existing task force that focuses on things related to this and made a recommendation connected to this. I think that's the longest document in the Dropbox. I'm going to get their name wrong, so let me pull it up quickly.
Will someone from there be on our panel or forum?
We could certainly ask. It's a good idea. They have not, to my knowledge, Leslie may know more than me, reconvened to specifically talk about this.
Okay.
Or released, a new white paper that specifically addresses this. And it took them years, is my understanding, to develop what they did put out a while back. So it's unlikely that they'll be able to move on sort of a time frame that would be helpful for a meeting next month.
Yeah, so Maria, de Blasio put together his task force on this. And right off the bat, people were that was controversial because he put, as Kit probably knows, he put people on this task force that is going to agree with his opinion alone. You know what I mean? Like so it's obviously his task force and it's kind of in the way he wants it. And they came out with their recommendations and that's where it kind of started, if that makes sense. And Kit can correct me if he knows differently.
Jesse, I think you get the last word before I run through next steps.
Oh, I can't really remember what I was going to say at this point. But yeah, I think everybody's points are all very well made, and I think the planning will just need to be very well done on this. But I think you guys can do it, and I think there's no pressure. I don't think there should be pressure to feel like the board, needs to come out with the committee needs to come out with a recommendation on this after just the one forum, or maybe components of it. It matters how you all feel afterwards. But I think you should have a follow-up committee conversation about how the event and what the results of the event were, and come off from that as to future recommendations. Because I do agree. I think what was so great about the first event you guys ran was the panel discussion. I think just the forum, it was just pure. It was so much good information and good discussion. That, and I think we tried to answer everybody's questions, but not necessarily say, oh, this is the solution. And so I think it'll be harder with this because people will probably have much more emotion behind it. But I think we can get there. But I do think someone said it, or Maria brought it up. What really made a big difference with getting people to attend the last event was the panel. So the sooner we can really lock in that panel, it gets butts in seats. People know these folks, they're interested in these leaders, And I think obviously this is a different topic, so it might be a little more difficult to get certain folks to come out and be able to have open discussions about it, but we should try.
Yeah.
I think, Jesse, there are a few groups who will be very willing to.
Well, I'm sure. I think we don't want to.
On both sides.
Yeah.
I know a few that, yeah.
So that tees up next steps really nicely. If you would like to join the next sort of small group planning meeting, that'll probably be next week on Wednesday or Thursday. I can't remember which day we landed on as a day that was good for everyone who opted into the first one. But just shoot me an email. The more the merrier, as long as we don't get to a point where we have quorum, because then it needs to be a public meeting. If there is someone who you have in your network, friend, colleague, anybody who you think would be good for the panel, please email me. I'm planning to start doing outreach ASAP. And anyone who wants to be involved in giving feedback on goals, deck, questions, or anyone who wants to have an actual role in the forum, definitely just let me and Jesse know ASAP, so that we can start to, cross our I's and dot our T's.
Before we end, I have something, just a quick thing about street life, just a question, actually. It was circling back to when they were talking about the sanitation clearing the bike lanes. Is there an enforcement mechanism for business owners that actually push snow into the bike lane? Or is that just a loophole that it's just, there's nothing we can do about it? I mean, that would be essential. I mean, they're all like, it's like scaffolding you can have forever. Is it one of those loophole type things where you have to have them documented on film, pushing the snow? You know what I'm saying? I mean, if anyone knows the answer to that, because if there is an enforcement mechanism that's realistic, that might be the way to go.
No, David, not to my knowledge. There's nothing about where the snow goes, it just where it ends up. And so you're talking about just two different responsible parties, property owners on the sidewalk, and then the city of New York on the street.
So if they're pushing the snow on the street, they're allowed to do that then? Or it's just a loophole?
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing illegal per se about it. So they're clearing their sidewalk of snow. That's what they're doing. That's what's illegal, is leaving the snow on their sidewalk. Where the snow ends up, again, is not their responsibility. That becomes the city's responsibility, who then removes it and puts it back on the sidewalk.
It's catch-22. All right.
Say it's very much like.
All right. Last on the agenda, any new business, any quick new business? Anybody want to make any suggestions or anything going forward on this? David, I see you're biting on the bit there to say something. I know.
No, just a little update on the open culture.
A quick update. True.
Can you hear me?
Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, the city just released guidelines just like at 5 o'clock this afternoon that I've been discussing on an email chain with League of Independent Theater, and they're very confusing, and there's a lot of questions that are being raised. We're talking about having a forum ourselves to educate folks on how to apply for it. And we were hoping to do this perhaps with CB2 at the end of February, but information is just being released. I'm just not sure how much lead time we're going to need before we are able to distribute information that's correct and updated, especially since we have so many questions about the guidelines that are different from what the initial legislation said it was going to be. So there's some, and Sarah, I included you on an email chain, and hopefully CB2 is meeting on this tomorrow night at their culture committee meeting, and Lit is going to speak there, and I'm going to try to join that meeting, so and hopefully be able to get more of an update that we can share, and then we would share with Alan and Jesse and everybody about our potential forum, which is still a little bit up in the air from my point of view.
Cool. All right.
Anybody? One question.
Cool.
Based David, you may have the answer to this, but maybe something that we would need more information on. But I know it's somewhat connected, but also different. But the reopening or the opening of Little Island and sort of the crescendo of kind of bringing the arts back. I know we've had Little Island come and present multiple times, but I'm wondering if we should have them come in the near future, given that that official reopening is just a few months away. Wondering kind of what that programming is going to look like and how we can engage the community, as presumably there'll be more traffic and more people coming to the area to check performances out there.
Sarah, did you have anything you want to add in on that? Sure.
I think that Alvernique I could reach out, or I'm sure Jesse has, and you guys have contacts too, but Alvernique just sent me actually a little follow-up email because we had been in touch. I think that they would be willing to do that. I participated in their performance in the park panel review, and they've kind of already selected who is going to be, performing or doing some sort of cultural event. But maybe it could be nice to come back and see, who they've selected and what's going to be happening, throughout the summertime and what that looks like.
Cool.
Yeah, I think that'd be great, especially since I know there's also work being done with like the 20th anniversary, some anniversary of Tribeca Film Festival. So I think it'd just be great for us to, like, as a community, really rally around these very big, like, cultural pieces that are coming back to life, post-COVID or during COVID.
We're also working with them with the High School of Fashion. We've been in touch with that lovely Lindsay. I know her, Alvanique, her first name is Alvanique, her last name is Lindsay. I always think of her as Lindsay, but we're also planning a fashion show in the fall for the High School of Fashion. So thank you for that great connection as being part of this ACES.
Cool. Sarah, you'll stay on top of that? You stay in touch with them on that, Sarah?
Yeah.
Okay.
Jesse, were you saying something?
Yeah, I was going to say, I just want to add something on that sort of recently came up. So Chelsea Market as a entity, when the rezoning happened a while ago now, one of the commitments was a routine working group that met with members of our board and a number of other elected officials on a number of the commitments that were made from that rezoning. So Betty McIntosh and Paul Devlin, who are the co-chairs of the CLU, Chelsea Land Use, have been going to that meeting. They just started again. They hadn't met since 2019 mostly because of COVID. Also because Google took over responsibility of Chelsea Market there. So one of the things I will just say, flag that it's not necessarily this committee's responsibility, and I'm sure it'll get worked out, but I do think the idea of having both Pier 55 and Pier 57 having events at the same time, in terms of just whose event gets sort of precedent in terms of if they're outdoor events and noise and sound and all of that, is still being figured out. And I think it is something we want to think about, and not so much in terms of like CB2 versus CB4, but more about what type of event should get precedent, whether it's a ticketed event or a private event or a public event, and made for the public and made for the folks that we want to make sure they get advocacy. So I just want to throw that out there. That is a topic I know Gail's office raised during the meeting with Google, and there wasn't necessarily a real clear understanding of how that's going to work out, but I think it is something we need to think about, and maybe we might need to start to think about advocacy. Maybe again crossing over with WPE or something along those lines, just because it's somewhat park and anyway.
All right, cool.
We could change our name to Street and Pier Life.
I'm sorry?
Say again?
The name to Street and Pier Life.
Well, I just did want to say we reached out to them for like an outdoor graduation. We reached out to Little Island, also but they said no, they don't have any ticketed events in the park. They have none of that sort of thing. So I think that I know they have a 750 seat amphitheater. So we were really thinking that'd be a great thing, but they said, no, absolutely not. No graduations. And a little disappointing because it would have been perfect, especially in this COVID times, if they would have made an exception, but they were adamant, no, no, no.
Maybe they'll change their minds. Folks, anything? Is there a motion?
One
Yep.
more thing. One
One
more
more,
thing.
go ahead.
Sorry,
Okay,
just because Josephine isn't here, and so I know she wanted to continue the conversation about summer youth employment and trying to get some clarity around what's required in terms of documentation and you know, and just the sort of the requirements around the program. And so we had sort of shot back ideas around over email, and it sounds like March will have our hands full. So I don't think we need to worry about it right now, but I do want to just raise that. And I will say that youth employment was clearly one of the things that was highlighted in this community needs assessment that we had actually paid for. So I just don't want us to lose track of something along those lines. So I think there's plenty of really great organizations and information that we can help organize and do not necessarily a big forum on, but something at a committee level, but really kind of focus on where the gaps. And we have a lot of high schools that have a lot of experience. So I would just want to make sure we don't lose track of that for maybe after this forum, after the education forum.
We are the board of forums.
You guys are.
We got to get out there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Anything, folks? No? A motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Cool. Happy Valentine's Day.
I second it. And happy Valentine's Day.
And thank you all for your work. Thank you.
Bye, guys.
Thanks.